Good morning everyone. Today we'll be discussing about the last two topics of this chapter, power sharing. Now before we begin with those topics, let's just have a brief review of whatever we have studied till date. Power sharing, meaning sharing of power, sharing of responsibilities so that things can be administered properly, right? Power sharing means sharing of power at different levels so that there is no misuse of power. Now, what is power sharing? A democratic rule involves sharing power with those affected by its exercise. And who are the ones affected? We, the citizens. Power sharing ensures that people have the right to be consulted and have equal participation in the government. How? Through their representatives. They do have equal participation, but through their representatives. In a democracy, each individual has a say in governance through their elected representatives. Then we had discussed about the two cases of power sharing, right? One is Belgium, right? And the other one is Sri Lanka. If you remember about Belgium had two major communities. One was French speaking, the other was Dutch speaking. French speaking was only 40% of the population, but they were economically and educationally sound, and that is why they were ruling the government. If we talk about Dutch people, they were 59% of the population, but still they had no major role in the government. But slowly and slowly, when Dutch people, they began to grow economically and educationally, right? Even they demanded equal share in power. And this led to conflict between French community and Dutch community. To avoid conflict, what Belgium did, it had shared power between the two communities equally, right? And it has properly divided the powers between the French speaking community and the Dutch speaking community, so that no kind of disargument is there, and and any further or any future riots can be avoided. Now, if we talk about Sri Lanka, right? This is the the linguistic structure, the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka has two communities, Sinhala speaking and Tamil speaking. If we talk about Sinhala speaking, they are mainly Buddhist and Christians. If we talk about Tamil speaking, Indian Tamils are there and Sri Lankan Tamils are there. Sri Lankan means the one who originally belonged to Sri Lanka. Indian Tamil means the one whose forefathers had gone to Sri Lanka as a plantation worker in the colonial rule and had settled down there. Now, Indian Tamils and Sri Lankan Tamils are mainly Christians, Hindus and Muslims. Now, since majority were Sinhala speaking, so when Sri Lanka gained democracy, right? When Sri Lanka gained democracy in 1948, the Sinhala community, it played a major role in the government formation. Right? The government was formed by the Sinhala community only because they were in majority. But what went wrong was whatever policies were there, whatever government policies, whatever decisions were being taken, they were taken in such a way that only Sinhala community was, only Sinhala community received all the benefits. It received benefits in jobs, it receives benefits in education, and the minority community was completely neglected. They were given no rights. This led to civil war in Sri Lanka. They revolted and revolted. The government didn't hear. And finally, civil war was there in Sri Lanka. Right? A lot of riots, a lot of bloodshedding, people were killed, and this civil war turned to be complete bloody. Now, the civil war ended in 2009 and caused a terrible setback to the cultural, social and economic life of the country. Now, what have we learned from Belgium and Sri Lanka? Both countries are democratic, but they dealt differently with the concept of power sharing. If Belgium went for accommodation, Sri Lanka went for majoritarianism. Now, why is power sharing desirable? Two different sets of reasons can be given in favor of power sharing. Firstly, power sharing is good because it helps to reduce the possibility of conflict between social groups, as we have seen in case of Belgium. Since social conflict often leads to violence and political instability, power sharing is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. Because if there will be conflicts between social groups, definitely our political system will also be affected by it. This is also known as prudential reason, means a very calculative decision, the very calculative reason for power sharing. Why? Because to avoid any kind of conflict, to avoid any kind of civil war, it might turn into a civil war. And if civil war is there, definitely, the properties are damaged, people's lives are damaged, and the political system is in complete disorder. Power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. A democratic rule involves sharing power with those affected by its exercise and who have to live with its effect. This is also known as moral reason for power sharing. And who are the ones affected? We are the ones who are affected. What is prudential? Based on prudence means careful calculation. Now, why power sharing? Okay. Now, forms of power sharing. One basic principle of democracy is that people are the source of all political power. How? Because we are the ones who vote. We are the voters. We are the selectors. In a democracy, people rule themselves through institutions of self-government. In a good democratic government, due respect is given to diverse groups and views that exist in a society, like in our country, right? Our constitution makes sure that none of the social groups feel neglected. Our constitution makes sure that injustice is not done to any of the diverse groups existing in our country. Everyone has a voice in the shaping of public policies. Therefore, it follows that in a democracy, political forms of power should be distributed among as many citizens as possible. In modern democracies, power sharing arrangement can take many forms. Let us look at some of the most common arrangements that we have come across. Power is shared among different organs of government, means between legislative, executive, and judiciary. Legislature, the one who makes laws; executive, the one who implements; and judiciary, to avoid, right, it ensures that like a system of check and balance particularly, and it ensures that injustice is not done to any of the community or any of the citizens. Now, power sharing between legislature, executive, and judiciary is called horizontal distribution of power, because it allows different organs of government placed at the same level to exercise different powers. They are at the same level. Legislature, executive, and judiciary are at the same level, right? But the powers are different. Legislature is the one which makes laws, executive executes them, and judiciary ensures that injustice is not done to any of the communities. Each organ checks the other. This arrangement is called a system of checks and balances. Power can be shared among government at different levels. What was the first one? That was at the same level. Now we are talking about power sharing at different levels, means union government, state government, and local government. These are the three different levels of government. Power may also be shared among different social groups, such as the religious and linguistic groups. Community government in Belgium is a good example of this arrangement. This method is used to give minority communities a fair share in power. Power sharing arrangements can also be seen in the way Political parties, pressure groups and movements control or influence those in power. When two or more parties form an alliance to contest elections, and if they get elected, they form a coalition government and thus share power. Coalition means Sangathan. Yeah, sorry, Gathbandhan. Fine. So these are the forms of power sharing. Power is shared power is shared at the same level of government, right? But powers are different. Different powers are shared, okay, at the same level of governments. That is called horizontal distribution of power. Power can be shared among different levels of government. That is called vertical sharing of power. Now, power between legislature, executive, and judiciary is called horizontal sharing of power. Power sharing at different levels of government is called vertical sharing of power. Then, power sharing among different social groups, and power sharing can also be seen in the way political parties, pressure groups, and movements control or influence those in power. Now, class, what you will do is you will go through all these slides once again. Go through all the slides, reach, read each point very carefully. Fine. And then your homework will be you will draw two posters, one for accommodation, one for majoritarianism, one for accommodative government in Belgium, other for majoritarianism government in Sri Lanka. Right? And you will submit this homework to me positively by tomorrow. Thank you.